friend and community reunion, a lot of which is all of those at once. So I have to say, I'm just so honored to be here with all of you, to get to mark this particular moment, to get to mark the sadness and of Yom HaZikaron, and as we transition to Yom HaAtzmaut, to the great celebration of Israel's independence. So first, I just want to welcome you all, and again say we're so honored to have you with us. The second thing is we are going to ask people to stay on mute. Again, not because I don't care about what you have to say, but there's often a lot of feedback. My brother would love it if you do have questions, to feel free to ask them anytime. You can do that by chatting. So if you go on the bottom to the chat function, you can type in that question and he'll try to get to as many of the questions as possible. If you have more questions afterwards, I'm happy to put you in touch with him directly and you can bother him. But we do want you to feel free to ask questions, and you can feel free to chat those at any time. I want to introduce who my brother is. My brother is Josh Hartuv, or he's often called Shuki as a nickname for Josh. I call him, much to my mother's chagrin, Dookie. It's a nickname for Dode, Uncle, and Shuki, and we combined it to be Dookie. She doesn't really like that. Hi, Ema. It's good. I'm glad that you're here. My brother Josh, he made Aliyah in 2011. He served in the Israel Defense Forces in the Tzanchanim and the paratrooper unit. He spent a number of years living on Kibbutz Saad in southwest Israel near Ashdod and Ashkelon. My brother graduated from Israel's tour guide course, and he has guided many, many groups, including some members and families from our synagogue. I know for me, on a professional level, I've gotten to actually consult with him when I have done things related to Israel. I often say, oh, Josh, can you tell me more about this site? Can you tell me more about how I can add knowledge to here? And the thing that I'll say about my brother is, not only am I biased about him and that I love him and how much I care for him, and even though we fought a lot as kids, how close we are now, but also that he really is an expert tour guide and educator, and I'm so grateful to have gotten to learn with him. And it's one of my greatest honors when I've gotten to connect members of our shul to him so that he can introduce them to all that Israel and Jewish history and the Jewish people have to offer. Josh, it's an honor to have you with us. I want to tell us for a second about what we're going to be doing today. Today, we are marking, on today's calendar, Yom HaZikaron, the Memorial Day for fallen Israeli soldiers, which transitions into Yom HaAtzmaut, to the celebration tonight of celebrating Israel's Independence Day. In Israel, on Yom HaZikaron, when there isn't coronavirus, you will see Israelis going throughout the country, going to visit graves of family members or friends who have died in service to their country. And in Israel, every person's affected, not like in this country where there might be people who don't have family members or friends who have served. In Israel, everybody knows somebody who died in service of the country. So on Yom HaZikaron, Israelis go and visit, whether it's Har Herzl, Israel's national cemetery, or cemeteries around the country, visiting their family members, their loved ones, their friends who have died in service of the country. We're going to be doing a version of that. Virtually, we are going to be hearing the stories. Josh is going to be telling us the stories of soldiers who have died in service of the state of Israel, to hear their stories, to visit places that were essential to that story, and then going to Har Herzl, to Israel's national cemetery, to see what the commemoration is normally like there. We're going to light a Ner Neshama. We're going to light a memorial candle. If you have a candle, I invite you to feel free to grab a candle. We'll have a moment where we will light it, where I will recite, along with Rabbi Siegel, an El Maleh, a memorial prayer for soldiers who have died. And then we will do what is done in Israel. We're going to begin transitioning to Yom HaAtzmaut. We're going to see what it's like on Har Herzl, to watch how that transition normally happens. And then we will we'll go to Heichal Atzmaut, to Israel's Independence Hall, where the state of Israel was declared, to go back to that celebratory moment. And then we're going to sing a song of Hallel. We're going to sing a particularly festive song in celebration of Yom HaAtzmaut. So that's our plan for today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to chat them. It's an honor to have you all here. And I'm going to pass it on to my brother, Josh Hartuv, to take us on this tour.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Davidal. It's really nice to be with all of you guys today. I mean, for me, it's already Yom HaAtzmaut, but for you guys, it's still Yom HaZikaron. So I'm really honored and touched to be able to, in a way, extend my Yom HaZikaron to be with you guys and to help make it a meaningful experience for all of you. So while we're doing that, again, just so my name is Josh Hartuv. Originally it was Goldberg, but my brother's name also was originally Goldberg. So Iman Abba, I love you too. Uh, but so with all that, I wanted to take you on this tour. And the tour that I'm going to show you, we're going to focus on a few different lives. We're going to focus on two specific stories that we're also going to focus on a few others as well. But two of them are going to be kind of the main event. But I wanted to first open up our experience by visiting Har Herzl. Just have a quick look at what Har Herzl looks like. What is Har Herzl? Har Herzl is the most famous of Israel's military cemeteries, Israel's national cemetery, which is in Jerusalem, where it is most famous for being the resting place of many prime ministers and presidents and important dignitaries. It's also famous for being a place where there's lots of memorials, which I'm going to show you a little bit later on. But the most important function of Har Herzl, which is often the most overlooked function of Har Herzl, is that it's the cemetery of Jerusalem, for Jerusalem's soldiers and Jerusalem's victims of terror. That it's not just about this big national cemetery, but it's about Jerusalem specifically as the capital city. And in that way, it's given that prominent feature. And it makes it synonymous in a way. Har Herzl becomes synonymous with Yom Hazikoron, Israel's Remembrance Day. And so after this nice little view that we have of being in the cemetery itself, I'm actually going to take you out of the cemetery. And I'm going to move on to our first story that we're going to highlight. And then after that, we're going to go back into Har Herzl to help understand what Yom HaZikaron is all about when we go to Har Herzl itself, and we'll hear the siren and such like that. Part of the advantage of doing these tours as a virtual experience, as opposed to being in the place itself, like today I was supposed to be guiding with a group actually here in Nahariya, and we were going to visit a military cemetery in Nahariya. And I know some of the stories of some of the soldiers who are buried there in Nahariya, but in a way, as a tour guide, I would be limited to telling stories of the soldiers that are there, which there are plenty of stories that are there. But by being virtually, we can tell stories of people from all over the country. And so I've built this whole way to tell a whole bunch of stories that Rabbi Russo and I have planned two stories specifically of the 5 names that I have set over here. And the first one that we're going to go into is the story of Chana Senesh. Now, Chana Senesh is a story that many of you, if not all of you, may have heard of her name before. She is one of the most famous of all of people buried in Har Herzl. Chana Senesh has a really amazing story to her, where she's born and grows up in Hungary. And she grows up really as a secular Jew, someone who's not really connected to the Jewish community so much, doesn't really go to shul that often, knows that she's Jewish, of course, and has some kind of Jewish identity. But her Jewish connection isn't really so strong. And come the 1930s, with the rise of Nazism in the Nazi party in Germany, that led to a whole wave of anti-Semitism in Europe, as we know from our history books, and where Chana Senesh really felt this, all of a sudden, that she was this outsider in Hungary. And she was actually at a Christian school. Her grades allowed her to go into an elite Christian school that allowed a certain number of Jews to go there. But once she was there, she realized that she needed to do something. She needed to associate herself with other Zionist youth movements in order to feel some kind of camaraderie with Jews in the world that are also feeling this strain of anti-Semitism. And in high school, she becomes really active in some Zionist youth movements. And at the age of 18, she decides, enough of Hungary, I need to move to Israel. And she makes Aliyah, she moves to Palestine, and goes to work at the agricultural school of Nahalal for women, the agricultural school for women in Nahalal. And you can see her eventually being one of the founders of Kibbutz Sdot Yam, which is right next to Caesarea or Caesarea. Some of you may have visited on your various trips to Israel. You may have been to the Roman ruins in Caesarea. And she helped to build up this amazing kibbutz. But it wasn't enough for her. It wasn't enough that she had made Aliyah. It wasn't enough that she was an active Zionist socialist who believed in all these amazing social justice themes. She needed to do something extra. And so she joins the Haganah. But even from joining the Haganah, She needed to join something more. The Haganah is kind of the precursor to the IDF, the precursor to the Israel Defense Forces, but that still wasn't enough for her. This is the 1940s. She needs to go and fight against the Nazis, not against, protecting the different Jewish settlements in the north. So what does she do? She joins the British paratroopers, and she does jump training in Egypt. This is actually not her. This is a movie about her that was made in the 1970s. So it's an actress playing her. We don't actually have footage of her jumping, unfortunately. But she goes in Egypt and she learns how to do jump training. And eventually in 1944, she's given a mission to jump to Yugoslavia and cross the border into Hungary. And before she crossed the border in Hungary, you can see in 1944, she wrote a letter to her brother, Georgie, because her brother and her mother were still in Hungary. And part of the motivation of her doing this mission was that she was going to, in a way, save her family. And she's dropped here in Yugoslavia, in what was Yugoslavia, and now in Croatia. And she's going to cross into the border into Hungary. And as she lands in Yugoslavia, she receives intelligence from the partisan groups that she met up with that the Nazis had occupied Hungary now. And it was too dangerous for Yugoslavian partisan groups, and definitely for Jewish British soldiers to cross the border into Hungary. And the 3 other male paratroopers that were with her agreed. And they said, yeah, we're not going to go in. But Chana Senesh needed to go. She said, I've got family in Hungary. I need to go save them. And this is what my job is. This is what my task is. And so she crosses the border here in Hungary. And within hours, she is already captured by the Nazis, where she is tortured to try to get information about how to use the British radio transmitters, which she doesn't give. The only information she ever gives is her own name. And after a few weeks, she is tried and convicted of treason, and she is executed for treason, and she's buried in the Jewish cemetery in Budapest. Now, sorry, one second. Just having that. There we go. Now, when she's in prison, and even before she's in prison, she's known for her songwriting and known for being someone who writes everything down. I showed you the letter before. And I'm going to play for you the most famous song that she wrote, which is called Halicha Caesarea, A Walk in Caesarea, which is the translation is just down here below. But I'm going to play for you the song while I show you what Sdot Yam looks like, the kibbutz that she built. So the song that she writes is about the sand and the sea, the rush of the water. She's built a kibbutz on the sea. She wasn't talking allegorically. She was talking legitimately, that she loves the sea and she loves being there. In 1948, the State of Israel is founded, and already from the beginning of the founding of the State of Israel, the country petitions to the government of Hungary and to the British government to allow for Chana Senesh to be reburied here in Israel. And you would think that it would be a no-brainer to, of course, bring Chana Senesh, who's this great Zionist hero, to Israel, but there's a strong British military tradition of burying your fallen soldiers in the place where they fell, in the place where they are killed. And it took a while, it took a couple of years until 1950 for the British to finally acquiesce, to agree to bring Chana Senesh to Israel. And her body is brought to the port in Haifa. as you can see over here, brought down in a funeral procession from Haifa by ship. So that's just to the north of where we're looking right now. And the funeral procession is brought through Kibbutz Sdot Yam. You can see the beach of the kibbutz over here, where it's actually led by her brother and her mother who had survived the Holocaust and that had made it to Israel. Where Chana Senesh is buried to this day is in this really special plot in Har Herzl, where you can see there's 7 plots that are over here, 3 of which have a long patch of grass just before the gravestone. That's because those are bodies that are actually buried at the site itself. The other 4 actually are memorials to paratroopers in Chana Senesh's unit that their bodies have never been found. And they shaped the 7 soldiers, the 7 memorials in a way, in the shape of a V. On the one hand, because the V, the putting your 2 fingers like this and the 2, made it, was a symbol in World War II in that period for victory. And that maybe this loss of Chana Senesh's life in this unit ended up leading to victory for the Allies and victory for the state of Israel. But to bring it away from the more nationalist reason, the bigger picture reasons for why we make it into a V, you can look at kind of the more personal reasons, where it kind of looks like a parachute, where you have these cords that are coming from the bottom over here that lead to these bushes that surround all of the graves that are around it, just like a parachute, and hoping that they rest in peace with a nice soft landing in a way.
If I can interrupt you for a second, one thing that you also mentioned to me, and you might have alluded to it, but if you notice the 3 graves on the bottom, those have, you can tell that the person is buried there because there is the extension of the I don't know, say it, the grass or the shrubbery or the bushes that are there. The 4 on the top are a memorial, but is not buried there, and so that is, so you can't actually see it physically.
Exactly. And a few years later, the memorial tomb that was, the memorial grave that Chana Senesh had in Budapest was actually brought to Kibbutz Sdot Yam as well. And now you can go see what used to be above Chana Senesh's grave in Budapest has now been brought to Israel. And what's interesting about looking at her stone, which is something that we're going to bring up a little bit later on, is that she doesn't have the symbol of the IDF over here. She has a symbol of the Haganah because she was a Haganah soldier. And for the ones who are memorialized but not actually buried in this spot, it says next to their name, Lezecher, in memory of those people. And so that's the story of Chana Senesh. And the other story that I wanted to bring up with you is this story over here of Erez Stark, which is a story that very few of you may have heard of his name before. Erez Stark was a soldier in the communications division during the occupation of southern Lebanon, which I'm going to explain a little bit about in just a second. But just to go into Erez Stark's story, he's someone who was a superb athlete in his high school years. He represented Israel in volleyball tournaments in high school, international volleyball tournaments. He was also a pretty good basketball player as well. He was also very good with computers. Basically, he was an all-around pretty amazing guy who wanted to give as much as he could during his service in the army, and he ends up becoming an officer in the communications division in southern Lebanon, which I'll explain a little bit about right now. Where in 1982, the war in Lebanon, the first war in Lebanon, or Shlom HaGalil, Operation Peace of the Galilee, one of the most important battles and the most famous of all the battles is conquering this fortress over here, this old Crusader fortress from around 800, 900 years old. That was an incredibly important strategic place for reasons I'm going to show you. But in the day after it was conquered in 1982, Ariel Sharon, the defense minister, and Menachem Begin, the prime minister, went to go visit the fortress. It shows how important the place really was. The occupation of southern Lebanon after the war of 1982 continued until the year 2000, where if you see the blue line, the dark blue line that's over here, this is the line that marks Israel's current borders. And between 1982 and 2000, much of this area below this blue line was occupied by Israel. The reason being, we're not going to get into all the reasons now, but part of the reasons being for peace in the Galil, to make it so that people in the north were living safely and securely from attacks from Hezbollah, but also to protect ethnic minorities that lived in the south of Lebanon. And the most important base, as I mentioned before, is this old Crusader fortress called Beaufort. And the reason why it was so important is because it was the only base that Israel had at the time that was on the other side of this Litani River. Now, the Litani River isn't just an important water source, but it's also a very important highway that leads from the east in Syria all the way to the sea in Lebanon. And so by Israel controlling Beaufort, they essentially control this whole highway that connects Syria and Lebanon, which is where Hezbollah was getting most of their supplies from, and still to this day, still gets much of their supplies from Syria. And so Beaufort was a base that had hundreds of soldiers, and Erez Stark was one of the top officers on the base, where he was in charge of the entire communications of Beaufort. Now, starting from the early 1980s, the way that soldiers every weekend would go to Beaufort and soldiers would be brought back for their weekend leave, they'd be brought on a bus from Metula to Beaufort. But these buses started getting attacked. So instead, they started bringing armored cars back and forth, Metula to Beaufort. But those started getting attacked. So then they started bringing helicopters from Rosh Pinah, which is just down to the south over here, all the way up through Metula, crossing in to Beaufort. And then they would come back, and they'd go back and forth with the helicopters. Then eventually the helicopters started getting attacked. So how are they going to bring soldiers back and forth? So they decided that they were going to use helicopters still, but at night and without lights on. And this goes on for a few years, bringing soldiers back and forth from Beaufort to Rosh Pinah at night without lights. And one fateful night in 1997, there's two helicopters that leave from the Rosh Pinah base and are waiting for permission to cross into southern Lebanon to get to Beaufort. And as they're circling around Kibbutz Dafna, one of the helicopter's tails hits with the other helicopter that was next to it. And the helicopter disaster of 1997 is what follows, where 73 of Israel's soldiers, all of the people who were on either of the helicopters, died in this incredibly tragic flaming ball of fire that fell from the sky, that when it landed, it was even worse because of all the ammunition that continued to explode on the helicopter that didn't allow for any first aid or any responders to come to help anyone that was there. This is the cover of B'Machaneh, which is the army newsletter. And this is a picture of the helicopter's crash itself after all of the burn. Now, I want to get into a little bit about, that was the story of this tragic helicopter disaster. And as you could probably imagine, Erez Stark was one of the people that was on that helicopter, one of the two helicopters. Now, when 73 people die in Israel, especially in such a tragic way, Israel's a small country. Everyone's going to know someone. And it really shook the whole nation for political reasons, social reasons, and all these number of different things. And before the helicopter disaster in 1997, the general way to memorialize soldiers was to build for them memorials, but in their hometowns. And this is a memorial to the helicopter disaster in Petach Tikva, where before 1997, you would memorialize soldiers from Petach Tikva, and you'd write that they died in this helicopter disaster. But starting from here, all of these memorials and all over the country didn't just have the names of the people from Petach Tikva. They would have the names of all of the people who were killed. And that was already one shift. And this is another memorial that's in the Negev, in Kibbutz Negba, where you can see 73 doves that go up to heaven on this post that's over here. But that wasn't enough of a way to memorialize them. And I'm going to show you another way that they memorialized the helicopter disaster. But before I get into that, I want to finish with our story of Erez Stark. Erez Stark, amongst all the amazing things that I'd already mentioned about him before, was also a writer. And he kept meticulous journals and wrote poems as well to himself. And in the last journal that he left in his house, he wrote this song that had this line in it called Shum Davar Lo Yifga Bi, which means nothing will ever hurt me. And I'm going to play for you a song, and I'll follow with my mouse the lyrics so that you can follow along with the song as well, understanding what Erez Stark wrote.
And Josh, the picture is of Erez with his sister, right?
שום דבר לא אישה, לא כדור מחבלים, שום דבר כי ככה נשבעתי לאחי אחותי להורים ובכיתי בלילות ודאגתי בימים כי פחדתי שמשהו יפגע בהורים וקולו של אבי מהדהד לי בראש כבר שנים אם יקרה לך משהו אין לי טעם לחיים אין לי טעם למחר אין לי טעם לחיים אין לי טעם למחר.
Of this song again, this is a song that was written by Erez Stark. This is a picture of him with his sister over here. It was written by Erez Stark, but it was something that was in an army program that was done a few years later on a program called "This Is Soon to Be a Song," Od Me'at Nafoch L'Shir. And this song was chosen in Knesset Sechel, which is this alternative rock band, chose this song to perform. And I'm going to show you what the memorial looks like at the helicopter disaster memorial, where again, part of this paradigm shift is that you're not just having these memorials at the place where the people are from, but in the place where it happened. And this is just next to Kibbutz Dafna. You can see that over here, looks like a helicopter, and there's 73 stones that are inside this helicopter wheel. All of them limestone, which means that they, from a distance, look the same, but from up close, they all look very different. In a way, like soldiers from a distance, they all look like, they're wearing green, they've got guns with them, or they don't have guns with them, but they all basically look the same. But up close, they all have their own individual story. And what's really special about the memorial itself is that through the middle of it, there's rushing water. That there's steps on the rushing water that lead to this black pool. It's over here. And the steps for the rushing water make it so that there's a sound, there's a rushing sound, a shh, which in a way sounds like a helicopter in motion. And to make it a little bit more personal in a way, I can bring you to the memorial itself. We're right by the tail of the helicopter from that memorial. There is this little place of serenity, of peace, where if anyone wanted to go, Lezecher 73 Arzei HaLevanon, in memory of the 73 cedars of Lebanon. And the name Erez, the Erez Stark, means cedar, the Lebanon cedar being the famous tree of Lebanon. And this is the front page headline from Yediot Achronot of all the faces of the people who were killed in the disaster in 1997.
Josh, if I can interrupt you for a second, the other thing that you should know about that sign in memory of the 73 Arzei Levanon, the cedars of Lebanon, that phrase Arzei Levanon, cedars of Lebanon, is based on a medieval poem that is for martyrs who were killed during the Crusades. So with any given sign that you might see in Israel, a simple 2 words, Arzei Levanon, cedars of Lebanon, is meant to have multiple layers of meaning. So this happening, so both in the people who it's being named after, and also referring back to martyrs in Jewish history.
Right. And here you have another view from up close of all of the 73 stones and the water that rushes in order to get to that pool. And we're coming closer to our end of the Yom Hazikaron section of of the tour here. But before we ended, I wanted to take you back to Har Herzl. And I wanted to focus with you on, in a way, the differences between the different types of sections in Har Herzl. Where this section that's over here, where you can see the graves of Dado Elazar, David Elazar, who was a chief of staff in Israel, and Yoni Netanyahu, who is one of Israel's most famous soldiers from 1967, 1973, and most famously from the raid on Entebbe, which rescued over 100 hostages in 1976. Where the chief of staff, Dado Elazar, was the chief of staff during the Yom Kippur War. Both of them died in 1976. And again, this is the chief of staff. This is Israel's most famous soldier. You'd expect them to be buried in a section for famous, important soldiers. But they're buried actually right next to a sergeant, a corporal, people who are regular ranked people. And without searching out these graves specifically and knowing exactly how to find David Elazar and Yoni Netanyahu, you wouldn't be able to find them. But this is it's very different than when you go to the newer sections in Har Herzl, like visiting Michael Levin's grave, which is a lone soldier that you may have heard of, who was killed in action in the Second Lebanon War, who's an American soldier who came from Philadelphia, where when Michael Levin was killed, a new phenomenon began that all of these Americans and people from, even not just Americans, people from all over the world, when they would come to visit Har Herzl, they would go to Michael Levin's grave. And they would bring with them their birthright name tag. Lone soldiers would bring their tags from their different units and leave it at the grave. And all of a sudden, these graves that, when you looked at before, were part of this national tragedy, national identity that had no real personality to them, all of a sudden, you see Michael Levin's grave and you're struck by him. You can really see what he was all about. And then in 2014, in the war in Gaza, every single grave now looks in a way like Michael Levin's, where there's flags of different units in different countries where people are from. This one over here has a guitar, a surfboard, and beer bottles, showing again the personality of the person that's there. That it wasn't that these people died as some sort of national tragedy that brings some sort of national triumph, which we're going to talk about for Yom HaAtzmaut, but these are people who, it was personal, it's real personal sadness. And that in a way is what Har Herzl is all about. It's this contrast between national tragedy and personal tragedy. And you have all these memorials. This is a memorial to the Jews who fought in the Jewish quarter of the Old City, where it's a memorial that's designed to look like you're walking through a tunnel in the Old City of Jerusalem, where the most famous of all the soldiers that's there is this soldier here, Nissim Gini, was the youngest Israeli soldier ever to be killed in battle, who was 10 years old when he fell, who was posthumously inducted into the IDF. You have a memorial to the Dakar submarine from 1968, which was a submarine that mysteriously went missing in the Mediterranean Sea. And this memorial was built in 1970, and then this kind of buoy was attached to it in 1999 when the Dakar was found. And the last thing that I'm going to show you, and the last song that I'm going to play for you, is this amazing memorial to Operation Moses in 1984, where there's a new Netflix movie that just came out called The Red Sea Diving Resort, which is all about the Mossad operation, Israel's operation to bring thousands of Ethiopian Jews to save them from the civil war going on in Ethiopia, to bring them to Israel. Now, the Ethiopian Jewish community had been around for 2,000 years, maybe even more, and had always dreamed about going to the land of Israel. And even though geographically they're really close, they never went. And Israel, in a way, was this mythical place. And it was thought to be this amazing miracle when the Ethiopian Jews came to Israel in Operation Moses. It was this great celebration, great miracle that took place. And if you watch the Red Sea Diving Resort movie, you'll get that exact same feeling. That it's this amazing miracle with great ingenuity and great cooperation between the Jewish community of Ethiopia and the Israeli Mossad, working together to make this amazing thing happen. But for most Ethiopian Jews in Israel, most Ethiopian Israelis, they don't think of Operation Moses, Mivtza Moshe, as this great success and this great miracle. You can see the houses that are over here are memorializing the houses of the Jewish communities that used to live there. And you can see these black stones that are over here that show the Ethiopians trekking through the Sudanese desert in order to reach the meeting point with the Mossad. Now, trekking through the Sudanese desert was pretty tall order, and many of them, as you can see from some of the stones, fell along the way and were falling. And some of them passed away. Around 2,000, maybe even more, Ethiopian Jews were essentially killed by the terrible conditions trekking through the desert. These little turtle shells on the ground are how they would bury the dead in the desert, because they weren't able to dig in the hard rock and in the hard sand of the desert in Sudan, and so they would cover the bodies with these stones, with these rocks, so that animals in the sun wouldn't destroy the bodies, at least for another couple hours until all the people pass through. And the last song I'm going to play for you before we go on to, in a way, transitioning, doing an El Malei Rachamim, and then eventually transitioning to Yom HaAtzmaut, is this one that's over here, which is the Journey to the Land of Israel, sung by Shlomo Gronich, and also a choir of the Sheba Choir, which is a choir of Ethiopian Israeli children. And it's a very emotional song, and so we'll follow the mouse as it plays. Incredibly emotional song, and it's one that always gets to me and one that gets to a lot of people. So now I'm going to show you, just on Har Herzl, what happens on Yom HaZikaron when the siren goes off. There's a siren that happens at night and a siren that happens in the morning as well. And the morning one lasts 2 minutes, where soldiers are assigned to every single grave of any soldier who was killed in action, where when I was a soldier in the paratroopers, I had the experience that I got to actually go to stand by a soldier who was killed in 1973 during the siren as well. So I'm going to show you a video of what the siren sounds like on a usual year, not a coronavirus year, of what it looks like on a Herzl. can see that there's civilians as well as soldiers that are there. And just so you have a bit of context of what happens in Israel today, this is a video that I took of what Tel Aviv looked like at Kikar Rabin, at the Rabin Square, when the siren went off when I was there. And with that, we're going to actually move on to kind of concluding Yom HaZikaron in a way, and bring you back here to, which is the plot where Michael Levin's grave is over here, as you can see now, and you can understand kind of why his grave stands out so much. And we're going to say the El Malei Rachamim prayer. And so, Reb David, take it away from here.
Well, and thanks, Josh. And I think, Josh, the thing that was really powerful for me, and I'm not sure for other people, when we imagine a Memorial Day for so many, it can be hard to understand an individual narrative or story. And part of the goal of today is to say that we remember and have a memorial for all Israeli soldiers and all those who have fallen in protection of the state of Israel, but also not to lose individual stories, whether it's Chana Senesh or Erez Stark, to see that picture of Erez with his sister, to see how memorials are created in a way to say, on the one hand, they're part of this broader whole, but also on the other hand, that we remember each individual person, that we stand beside each individual person who has died as we remember them. So if you have a candle, I invite you. I'm going to light mine at this time. I'll recite the Hebrew for the memorial prayer, and then Rabbi Siegel will recite the English. El Malei Rachamim Shochein Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei HaShechina B'ma'alo Kedoshim HaTorim Kezor Rakia Mazhirim Lenishmot HaKadoshim Shenilchamu B'Marachot Yisrael B'Machteret B'Shirutei HaBitachon U'Bitzvah HaHagana LeYisrael B'Asher Naflu B'Shat Milui Tafkidam Baginam Al Chai Am Yisrael Be'Artzo U'Michutz Halah U'lenishmot HaKadoshim Asher Naflu Korban Bifulot Terror Bavur Shanu Mitpalalim Le'iloi Nishmotehem Lachein Ba'al Rachamim Yastirim B'Seder Knafecha Le'olamim B'Yitzror HaChaim Nishmotehem Adonai Unachalatam V'yanuchu V'Shalom Al Mishkavam V'Nomar Amen.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Like the whole radiance of heaven to the souls of the holy ones who fought in Israel's battles and clandestine operations, in the defense services and in the Israeli defense forces, and to those who fell while serving to defend the lives of Am Yisrael and Israel and beyond, and to the holy souls that fell needlessly to acts of terror. In their names, and for this we pray, for the ascent of their souls. Therefore, Master of mercy, shelter them in the shadow of your wings forever and bind their souls in the bond of everlasting life. The Lord is their heritage. May the Garden of Eden be their resting place, and may they rest in peace. And to that, let us all say, Amen.
Amen. And so now Josh will take you through a few of the sites through the experience of what it means to go from this moment of Yom HaZikaron, this moment of memory, to Yom HaAtzmaut, to this moment of celebrating independence.
So we're now, right, as David was saying, we're going to start to do this transition in a way. We're actually at the peak of Har Herzl, where Herzl himself has been laid to rest. we're part of, building on what David was saying before, we're part of what was that transition I was alluding to a little bit earlier on about how do we view national tragedies? How do we view Yom HaZikaron? Do we view it as this thing that is this great national tragedy that eventually leads to great national triumph? Or do you just see it as terrible personal tragedy? And the earlier, with the idea of having national tragedy leading to national triumph is in a way much easier to cope with. If you think about the various songs that define Israel's wars, so Naomi Shemer's song Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, which in a way defines the 1967 Six-Day War, and Naomi Shemer's other song Lu Yehi, which defines the 1973 Yom Kippur War, all of them about, in a way, triumphing over all of the yes, there's been lots of death, and yes, there's been lots of terrible things that have taken place, but there's some sort of national triumph that can come at the end of the day. And from looking at stories like Erez Stark's and looking at Michael Levin's grave and looking at the graves of Tzuk Eitan from the Gaza war, you can really see that it's starting to change in Israel, where people really view it as personal tragedies. And part of the way to transition from a personal tragedy into a national triumphant day of Yom HaAtzmaut is to transition from personal tragedy to personal triumph. And every year, at exactly in this spot at Herzl's grave, there's this amazing torch ceremony that takes place where they honor 12 different Israelis who have given any number of things to different Israeli parts of society, education, culture, whatever it is, all representing the 12 tribes of Israel. You can see other images of the ceremony that took place just a couple of hours ago that really transitions this moment where it honors people who have individual triumph and individual ways of giving to the country of Israel. And this year, one of the honorees is Idan Reichel, who, connecting it back to the story of the Ethiopian immigration to Israel, the Operation Moses. Idan Reichel is a native-born Israeli, not Ethiopian at all. But one of the big contributions that he gave to Israeli society is that he helped to bring Ethiopian music into the regular pop music and really helped in a way to integrate Ethiopian Israelis to Israel. And the last image that I'm going to be showing you over here is the image of this rundown building in Tel Aviv, which some of you may recognize, some of you may know what it is, which is, and Idan Reichel lit one of the torches this year. So that was a really exciting moment in that way. This famous image that's over here of Ben-Gurion delivering the Declaration of Independence, which I'm going to play for you right now in this movie.
ביום שישי, ה' באייר תש"ח, 14 דוד בן גוריון. כל חייו היו מסע אל הרגע הזה.
זוהי זכותו הטבעית של העם היהודי, להיות ככל עם ועם עומד ברשות עצמו במדינתו הריבונית, אשר תפתח לרווחה את שערי המולדת לכל יהודי, ותעניק לעם היהודי מעמד של אומה שוות זכויות בתוך העמים. לפיכך נתכנסנו אנו חברי מועצת העם, נציגי היישוב העברי והתנועה הציונית, ביום סיום המנדט הבריטי על ארץ ישראל. ותוקף זכותנו הטבעית וההיסטורית, ועל יסוד החלטת עצרת האומות המאוחדות, אנו מכריזים בזאת על הקמת מדינה יהודית בארץ ישראל, היא מדינת ישראל.
You can see the huge waves of celebration that's taking place that's on the streets in Tel Aviv and all over Israel. You can see some of the images over here where, again, this is Rothschild Street, the most famous of all the streets in Tel Aviv, where they're all bashing on Ben Gurion's car as he's leaving because they're just so excited about everything. And this really famous image of a young girl who's waving the Israeli flag moments after the state of Israel has been declared. But the image that I want to focus with you on now, because again, we're not.
I just want to pause you for a second. Can you unclick from that picture for a second? Just so you're seeing what Josh is doing here. This is what the street looks like today. When Josh clicks on this particular image, it's looking at the exact spot, but how it looked in 1948. Right? So this is, first of all, I think the technology is cool, and Josh, you did a really good job putting it together. But just seeing the power of both the modern and the present state, and then what does it mean to flash back to this very exact space, even though we can't physically be there, trying to imagine this moment of what it was like and seeing these images in the place where we can still see today.
So the images of dancing and the images that we saw in the video are kind of the image that we have of the first Yom HaAtzmaut, the first declaration of the State of Israel. And what more celebratory moment could you ever possibly imagine? Except for when you look at this image over here. And you see David Ben Gurion's face after he had signed the most seminal document in Jewish history, if you will. And he's wiping his rather large brow, but he's wiping his brow not just from sweat from all of the things that he had just done that whole day, but you can see in his face that there's a lot of anguish. There's a lot of pain in his face. So he's not fully happy. And the reason why he's not fully happy is because of this. Because just the day before, on May 13th, 1948, on Dalet Iyar in 1948, there were 35 people who were left defending the Etzion block, the cluster of kibbutzim that were just south of Bethlehem. That there were 35 that were left defending the block. And after a certain amount of time, they decided that they weren't able to defend anymore. And they weren't able to make it anymore. And they surrendered. They waved the white flag. And they said, we can't do this. We're going to lose our battle against the local Arab militias. And they're taken as prisoners of war. And within minutes, they're killed in cold blood. And the newspapers in Israel, you can even see over here, State of Israel is born. It's the most celebratory, one of the most famous front pages in Jerusalem Post's history when it was still called the Palestine Post. This is the front page. This is the front headline for sure. But right in the center of that same front page, we have Egyptian Air Force Spitfires bombing Tel Aviv, the columns of Egyptian forces coming from the southern border, and the Etzion settlers taken prisoners of war. But the newspapers didn't even know yet. They couldn't confirm yet that all of them had been killed. But David Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, he knew. He knew what was going on. And part of the transition that we're making from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut is from its outset, from the birth of Israel, it's always had this really difficult transition. That for families of people who have lost someone, whether in a terrorist attack or someone who was killed in war or as a soldier, it must be the most traumatic experience, this personal experience of having to deal with this loss and this with the world, with all of Israel looking at you. Then the next day, having to celebrate with fireworks and alcohol and all the things that you celebrate with on Independence Day, and the 2 days being right next to each other, in a way clashing with each other. And it's up to us Israelis and Jews all over the world to figure out a way to not make it clash, but to make it somehow in some sort of sick way weave together. That you could do it in one way, looking at it in the Naomi Shemer school of thought, and take all of the deaths in a way as a national tragedy and turn that into national triumph. Or you could look at it like what Israel does nowadays, where you take the personal loss, the personal grief, and somehow turn it into some kind of personal triumph. But for most families, it's really difficult. And with that, we're going to do this really difficult transition live and in front of our eyes over here. And we'll say Kiddush that marks the transition between Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. And with that, we can, with heavy hearts, as the way it should be, we can celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut together tonight your time. You still have a couple hours left. David, would you like me to say it, or do you want to say it?
So you can say it in a second. I just want to introduce it for a moment. What we often say when we transition from when Shabbat and a Jewish holiday fall on one another, when Shabbat ends, but we go into a Jewish holiday, we do Havdalah. We do this moment where we separate Shabbat to, in theory, the rest of the week. But when it's Yom Tov, it's not really a new part of the week. And so we say Hamavdil ben Kodesh LaKodesh. Thank you, God, for distinguishing between one Kodesh, the holiness of Shabbat, and another Kodesh, the holiness that is the holiday. There are those in the religious Zionist camp that has created this blessing, which is meant to do the same. And this is based on what Josh was just talking about. We have this moment of Kedusha, of holiness, where we remember HaKadoshim, the holy ones, who gave their lives in defense of the state of Israel. And we acknowledge that. And we acknowledge that Kedusha, that sanctity. And then we say we're leading into another Kedusha, another holiness, which is the creation of the state. And that's what this blessing is meant to be. This blessing is meant to acknowledge that really hard tension, on the one hand, of deep personal and national sacrifice, and on the other hand, how that has led to and allowed for this state to be and allow it to keep striving to improve. So Josh, you can certainly, you can say that, Havdalah, that blessing for us.
I'm sure. And also to reiterate that in a way, the thing that marks the opening of Yom Hazikaron is that siren at night and then another siren during the day. And what marks Yom Ha'atzmaut is blasting the shofar and fireworks as well. So it's these two sounds that sound really similar to each other, but one bringing sadness and one bringing, in a way, joy. Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh LaKodesh, ben Choshech LaOr, ben Yagon LaSimcha, ben Evel LeYom Tov, ben Yom HaZikaron LeYom HaAtzmaut. Baruch HaNoten Oz v'Ta'atzumot HaNefesh lehichaletz mi'emek habacha el petach tikva shel Yom Chadash. Baruch HaMavdil ben Kodesh LaKodesh.
Amen. Josh, do you have the Lachadodi piece that we could do?
No, I don't have it over here. I forgot to add it onto the thing.
So
hold on, I'll get it out.
Okay, perfect. So what some have also done, we want to do one moment of song, and so this one piece that some people in the community are doing are singing a version of Lachadodi, the portions of Lachadodi that are all about the rebuilding of Jerusalem and Israel. And so I just will sing a couple of brief portions.
Fuck the Barrett Pavilion guy.
A couple of brief portions of the song in order for you to get to hear that. Josh, do you have it, or do you want me to share it?
I don't have it right now. You're going to have to share it if you have it up already.
All right, let's see if we can get it all in the chat function. Okay, there it is. So you should be able to open it up in the chat. And so the refrain, instead of Lachadodi, is Zeh Hayom Asa Adonai. This is the day that God has made. Nagila v'nismecha bo. Let us celebrate that moment. Mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzei mitoch hafecha rav lach shevet b'yemek habacha vehu yachamol alaychem lazeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo. Hitorari, kiva orech, kumiori, uri, shir daberi, kavod Adonai, alayich nigla zayom, asa Adonai, nagila v'nismecha bo. Lo tevoshi v'lo tikalmi ma tishtochachi umatemi bach yechesu ani yami v'nivneta ir al tila zeh hayom asa Adonai nagila v'nismecha bo. So I just want to conclude, Josh, is there anything else from you before I wrap up?
No. we're all done. I guess I'll just say one last quick thing, just to give myself a little bit of a plug and just to say goodbye to all of you guys in a way. First of all, I just wanted to thank you all so much for participating, for joining with me on this tour here. Again, my name is Josh Hartuv, David's younger brother. I'm going to share with you all in the chat. First of all, I'll share with you my email address, where any questions that you might, and we'll open it up for questions right now in general. If you would like to ask me any questions, whether it's about this tour, about anything in Israel in general, or about planning your next trips in Israel, you can feel free to message me anytime in that kind of way. So here's my email address. Another thing, because you guys still have another few hours of Yom HaZikaron, is I'm going to send also right now a link to a list that I've put together for Yom HaZikaron songs. Some of the greatest songs in Israel's history are made for Yom HaZikaron. And all the songs that I played for you today, plus a whole bunch of other ones from different people that I would have highlighted if we had more time, plus any number of other songs I just particularly liked and felt really connected to. You should definitely check out this playlist that I posted that's just over here. And then last but not least as well, if you would like to leave any sort of comments or rating publicly on Facebook or on TripAdvisor for this experience that you have with me over here, you can feel free to do that at Hartuv Tours. That's on Facebook, and then on TripAdvisor you can find me that way as well. But in general, I just had a really amazing time with you all, and thank you so much for participating, and I'm happy to answer any questions whenever David wants to finish up, and I'm happy to stay and answer a couple questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to pause you there, just make a few brief announcements. So the first thing I included in the chat, for those of you who are members of the synagogue, we do have this music survey called the Az Yashir Music Survey. It's closing soon. We'd really like your input, so please contribute to that. So please find that survey, and the link is right there in the chat. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., Rabbi Siegel is going to be having a conversation with Yossi Klein Halevi, one of the leading thinkers in Israel today, talking about what are we celebrating, a wide-ranging discussion on the state of Israel today and where it's going. So we strongly encourage you to join us for that. And finally, we just want to thank you all for being here. We're so grateful both to any of our members and supporters who have helped underwrite this program. We want to know that for this and many of our programs, we are not asking for a program fee, but if you are open to it, making a donation to our sustaining fund helps us continue this important work of offering these incredible programs and services to everybody who's here. So if you're able, we're glad that you're here no matter what, and if you're able, it just, that support helps us be able to continue doing our great work. I know Josh has to go in a minute or two he's doing another tour in Toronto. So I was gonna say, if you're in Canada, you should go, but if you're in the United States, you can go too. But I want to conclude with great thanks to my brother, Josh Hartuv. Josh, you, as I was watching, yeah, and we can give applause. I see so many people doing it. Josh, you really helped us see the past and the present from thousands of miles away. And so thank you for bringing the past and the present to us on our screens in our own homes. And I just was overwhelmed with this moving feeling of, where is our future going? We could look at the past, we can look at the present, we can see it all together, and please God, we can celebrate and think of a brighter future in Israel, in the United States, and Canada, throughout the world. So I'm gonna say, if you have any questions for Josh, feel free to email them to him, because he's gonna have to go in a minute or two. I'm happy to also pass those questions on. I'm gonna stick around for a few more minutes, and otherwise, everybody, it was such a pleasure to have you here. If you'd like to stay on, feel free to unmute yourself and say hello, and wishing everybody a meaningful Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. Thanks for coming.